Eamon Viral's hands shook as the wind ripped through the remote apiary. Rain slammed against his jacket, soaking him to the bone, but he didn't stop. A strange sound had pulled him out of his small cabin, high-pitched, urgent, almost like a child screaming. It wasn't human. It wasn't even animal, at least not anything he'd seen before. He lunged toward the source, slipping on mud and crushed honeycomb. One of his hives teetered dangerously, swaying as the storm howled through the trees. Then he saw them, two tiny creatures no bigger than his forearm, trapped inside the broken frame of a hive. Their scales shimmered wetly in the lightning, green and violet flickering across their bodies. One of them whimpered, a tiny, strangled hiss, and Eamon's chest tightened. "They're alive," he muttered under his breath. His voice barely carried over the storm, but the hatchlings seemed to hear it. Their small eyes locked onto him. They weren't just animals, they looked intelligent, alert, scared. Their wings were malformed, folding awkwardly against their sides, and a faint glow pulsed from the edges of their scales. Eamon didn't hesitate. He reached in, ignoring the stings of desperate bees and the risk of falling debris. He scooped up the first hatchling, wrapping it carefully in his jacket. Its small claws scraped his fingers and he flinched, but he held firm. The second hatchling tried to back away, shrieking in a high, eerie pitch. Another bolt of lightning illuminated the scene, and for a moment he swore he saw the tiny creature's eyes flash with a strange alien understanding. He had never seen anything like this. Bees swarmed around him, angry at the intrusion, but Eamon waved them off with a practiced hand. Years of beekeeping had made him quick, but this was different. These weren't bees, weren't insects. They were alive in a way that demanded protection, demanded care. Eamon stumbled back toward a safe patch of mud, balancing both hatchlings against his chest. One of the creatures hissed sharply and its glow flared brighter. A bolt of static energy arced between its claws and the wet honeycomb, making him stumble backward. He barely kept hold, his heart hammering in panic and awe. What was this? Some kind of alien life, somehow stranded in his hives? The storm wasn't helping. Thunder shook the ground, mud slid under his boots, and more bees swarmed in confused patterns. Eamon cursed softly but kept moving. He had to get them out, had to protect them, even if it destroyed a dozen hives. His livelihood meant nothing compared to these creatures' lives. Finally he reached the edge of his cabin porch, mud sucking at his boots. He laid the first hatchling gently into a box lined with blankets, careful to keep it warm. It made a soft chirping noise, almost like a laugh, and Eamon's chest tightened with relief. A small payoff, the creature trusted him at least a little. But the second one still wriggled in his arms, wings flaring, claws trying to scratch free. He whispered, "I've got you. You're safe now. Just trust me." Lightning flashed again, revealing tiny, faint markings across the creature's scales. Symbols, maybe. Glowing in the storm. They pulsed as if alive. Eamon froze. He had no idea what they meant. Then a strange hum rose through the air, low and vibrating. The wind carried it directly to the cabin, and both hatchlings stiffened, their eyes widening in terror. Eamon turned, heart pounding. From the treeline, a shadow moved, massive, darker than the storm around it. A shape that wasn't human, wasn't any animal he'd seen. Something enormous was approaching, drawn by the hatchling's presence. The first hatchling chirped in alarm, wings flaring despite their deformity. The glow became brighter, almost painful to look at, and Eamon's mind raced. He had to act fast. If this shadow was a predator, or a parent dragon, he couldn't let the hatchlings fall into its claws. He grabbed the second hatchling and bolted inside the cabin, slamming the door against the wind. Rain pounded the roof, lightning cracked the sky, and the hum of the approaching shadow grew louder, vibrating the floorboards. He pressed the hatchlings close, trying to calm their trembling bodies against his own chest. "What are you?" he whispered, more to himself than them. Before he could even process it, the cabin door shuddered violently as if something outside was testing its strength. Eamon froze. The hatchlings shrieked again, high-pitched and strange, and their glow pulsed wildly, almost like a heartbeat he could feel in his chest. Eamon realized in a sudden shocking clarity that these weren't just lost creatures. They were part of something far bigger. Something alive, intelligent, and dangerous. And he was the only one between them and whatever was coming. A shadow flickered across the cabin wall, enormous claws scraping the wooden frame. The hatchlings shrieked in unison, the light from their scales bathing the room in eerie, trembling colors. Eamon's breath caught. He had no plan. Only one thought hammered in his mind: protect them. At all costs. And then, in a flash of lightning, he realized the glow from the hatchlings was forming a pattern. Symbols he had never seen, but somehow they seemed to be communicating with him. His pulse raced. Something was alive in these creatures that wanted him to understand. Something impossible. Before he could react further, the cabin door rattled violently again, and a low, guttural roar echoed through the storm. Eamon's eyes widened. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm inside his own hands. The creatures looked at him, helpless yet strangely expectant. And he knew, whatever happened next he had to act, or all of them would be lost. The sound of massive wings flapping in the storm surged closer. Eamon's heart froze. Eamon's hands were slick with rain and sweat as he pressed the two hatchlings close, their small bodies trembling against his chest. The cabin shivered under the wind's fury, but the storm outside was nothing compared to the danger pressing in from the treeline. The hum, low and vibrating, had grown louder, almost deafening, and the shadow he glimpsed earlier wasn't moving away. Whatever it was coming, drawn to the hatchlings like a predator scenting its prey. He had to think fast. Years of beekeeping had taught him patience and precision, but this was different. He was no longer protecting hives, he was protecting lives he didn't fully understand. The first hatchling chirped softly, wings flickering with tiny pulses of light as if trying to reassure him. Eamon's pulse quickened. That glow, it wasn't just light. It reacted. He could feel it vibrating against his chest, syncing with his heartbeat. He placed the hatchlings in the middle of the cabin floor, keeping one arm on each to stop them from darting toward the walls. "Listen," he said, voice firm, steady. "I don't know who you are, but I'll keep you safe. Just trust me, okay?" The creatures blinked at him, their eyes shining in the dim lantern light. It wasn't full trust, but it was something. A fragile connection, small yet enough to give him hope. The low hum outside shifted. It wasn't just a sound now, it was intelligence. The hatchlings stiffened, letting out tiny hisses, and the glow along their scales flared in sudden bursts. Eamon froze, realizing the creatures were reacting to something he couldn't see. He peered out the rain-streaked window. The shadow had grown. Tall. Massive. He could barely make out its outline in the storm, but even that was enough to send a chill down his spine. Whatever it was, it moved with purpose. He grabbed a lantern and stepped outside, heart hammering, careful to keep the hatchlings within reach. Lightning flashed, illuminating mud and shattered hives, and for a brief moment he saw it, an enormous sinewy shape crouched at the edge of the trees. Its eyes glowed faintly, amber and intelligent, scanning the cabin. Every instinct screamed danger. Eamon's mind raced. He couldn't fight it head-on. He had to outsmart it. He thought quickly. The storm had soaked everything, making it slippery and unstable. The hives themselves could be weapons. He grabbed a few broken frames, scattering honey and broken comb in a path toward the approaching shadow. The hatchling's glow pulsed wildly as if approving the plan. Eamon's hands shook, but his mind worked. He could lead it away, confuse it, give himself time to protect the creatures. The shadow lunged suddenly, massive claws tearing into the mud. Bees scattered, buzzing in chaotic waves, and the hatchlings shrieked, flapping their small, malformed wings in panic. Eamon ducked behind a collapsed hive, swinging a frame like a shield, and shouted at the creatures, "Stay down. Keep calm." Miraculously, they responded, pressing close to the ground, wings glowing softly in sync with his instructions. One of the broken hives gave way under the weight of mud and rain, spilling honey across the ground. The predator paused, sniffing wary now. Eamon realized the sweet smell of honey might distract it, even if only briefly. He grabbed another hive box, throwing it in the opposite direction. The shadow turned, confusion flickering across its glowing eyes. A small payoff, he had bought himself precious seconds. But it wasn't enough. The creature moved again, faster this time, massive claws digging into the mud, leaving deep gouges as it approached the cabin. Eamon felt the ground shake under each step. The hatchlings shrieked louder, their tiny bodies vibrating with fear and energy. Then, without warning, the smaller hatchling leapt from his arm toward the shadow, letting out a high-pitched burst of light from its scales. The pulse slammed against the creature, momentarily stunning it. Eamon blinked, heart leaping. That small, fragile creature, no bigger than a loaf of bread, had just held back a monster. He scooped the hatchling up again, pulling it inside the cabin. Both creatures were shaking but alive. Eamon's chest heaved with relief. A small victory, yes, but the danger wasn't gone. The shadow lingered, its massive form retreating into the trees only slightly, still watching, still waiting. Eamon realized the creature's glow wasn't just a reaction. It was a defense, instinctive, dangerous, and powerful beyond his understanding. He turned back to the cabin. Rain-streaked windows, mud puddles reflected flickering lantern light, and the storm raged on. The hatchlings pressed against him, shivering, their eyes blinking slowly as if trying to convey something he couldn't yet comprehend. A tiny beat of calm amid chaos. A payoff, proof that his courage and quick thinking could keep them alive even if just for a moment. Eamon sank onto a chair, holding both creatures against his chest. The glow from their scales dimmed slightly, but the hum outside persisted. He knew one thing, the storm wasn't the only danger. Whatever had followed them here, whatever this shadow was, it wasn't just passing through. It was tracking them. And Eamon had no idea how far it would go or what it would do next. Lightning split the sky again, and in that flash he saw it, a faint outline behind the cabin. The shadow had grown larger than he remembered, moving with a purpose that chilled him to the bone. One of the hatchlings chirped sharply, wings flaring instinctively. The glow from their bodies pulsed violently, painting the walls in green and violet flashes. Eamon's heart raced. He had kept them alive for now, but the predator wasn't finished. And the storm, the strange creatures, and the glowing symbols on their scales were only the beginning. Something far bigger, far more dangerous was coming. He tightened his grip on the hatchlings, whispering, "I won't let them take you. Not now. Not ever." A deafening roar split the storm, shaking the cabin. Eamon's blood ran cold. He glanced at the hatchlings. Their tiny bodies stiffened, and the glow from their scales surged brighter than ever. Something had just arrived in the storm, something he couldn't yet see. And then the cabin door rattled violently as if trying to escape the hinges, and Eamon realized with a jolt that this was just the beginning. Eamon barely had time to catch his breath before the hum outside shifted again, sharper this time, almost like a pulse. The hatchlings pressed closer to his chest, their wings flicking nervously, and the glow from their scales surged in sudden bursts. Lightning flashed, illuminating the cabin, and for a brief second, Eamon thought he saw symbols etched faintly into the wood of the cabin walls. His eyes widened. That wasn't possible, the cabin had been standing for decades. He knelt beside the creatures, gently tracing one glowing mark along the smaller hatchling's wing. The pulse of light under his fingers felt warm, almost alive, and it synced with the humming outside. The bigger hatchling chirped sharply, its tail flicking like a warning. Eamon realized the creatures were communicating, either with each other or with something outside. His mind raced. He needed answers fast. Leaving them alone wasn't an option, but he couldn't just wait for the shadow to strike again. With shaking hands, he grabbed a lantern and crept toward the corner of the cabin where one of the older hives had been smashed to pieces. Honey and mud covered the floor and the frame was broken, but something caught his eye. Tiny grooves etched into the honeycomb, faint but deliberate. Symbols. Patterns. Eamon's heart pounded. These weren't random scratches, they were made on purpose. And the glow from the hatchlings seemed to respond to them. He tapped the honeycomb carefully, and the smaller hatchling's glow pulsed brighter, wings twitching. A sudden realization hit him. The creatures weren't just lost, they were signaling him, guiding him toward something. He bent closer, brushing away debris, and gasped. The grooves in the honeycomb formed a pattern almost like a map. But a map to where? He had no idea, yet the hatchlings' urgent chirps and the way their glow shifted made it clear. The answer was important. Something, someone, was depending on him. The low hum outside became a rhythmic thrum, vibrating through the cabin floor. Eamon froze. His eyes darted to the window, and he could just make out the enormous shadow moving between the trees. The predator, or parent, he wasn't sure which, was circling. Its movements were deliberate, calculating. Every instinct screamed danger, but now he understood something else. It wasn't mindless. It was watching him, measuring him, testing him. Eamon exhaled slowly, forcing calm. He had to act. He grabbed 2 hive boxes and scattered them along the path outside the cabin. Honey spilled across the mud, shining faintly in the stormlight. It was a gamble, but perhaps the scent and light would distract the predator long enough for him to study the symbols and protect the hatchlings. As he worked, the smaller hatchling wriggled free and hovered near the cracked window, wings flaring, letting out a sharp pulse of violet light. Eamon froze, stunned. That tiny burst had caused a ripple in the storm itself, or at least it seemed that way. Rain arced sideways in shimmering sheets, and the shadow recoiled slightly. The hatchling chirped again, almost defiantly, and Eamon felt a surge of awe. These fragile creatures carried power beyond his understanding. He returned to the honeycomb map. The lines seemed to shift under his fingers, glowing faintly where he pressed. A realization struck him. The symbols weren't just a map, they were a warning. A network. Something larger than this cabin, this storm, or even the shadow outside. The hatchlings weren't abandoned by accident, they were part of something much bigger. A sudden crash made him jump. One of the collapsed hives had fallen over under the wind, releasing a flood of angry bees. The creatures hissed and glowed violently, and Eamon acted on instinct. He shielded them with his body, letting the bees strike him instead of them. Pain shot through his arms and face, but he gritted his teeth, holding firm. The micro payoff was immediate. The hatchlings settled, chirping softly, their glow dimming slightly. He had protected them once again. But the real danger wasn't gone. From the trees, the hum shifted into a low growl, and the shadow moved closer. Eamon could hear its breathing, or whatever it used for breathing, heavy, measured, waiting. The glow from the hatchlings surged, reacting to the predator's presence. They weren't just scared, they were communicating, preparing for something he didn't fully understand. Eamon realized he needed to act quickly. He grabbed an old tarp and fashioned a barrier between the cabin door and the outside, hoping it would buy him a few precious seconds. Then, with a mix of fear and determination, he began tracing the glowing patterns on the hatchlings' wings, trying to mimic them on the cabin floor with chalk. Each symbol he copied caused the creature's glow to pulse in rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. Suddenly, the smaller hatchling leapt toward the corner of the cabin, its wings flaring. A sharp burst of violet light shot from its body, hitting the floor in a crackling arc. The roar outside faltered for a moment, as if something had been startled or repelled. Eamon stared in disbelief. That tiny creature, so fragile and small, had just held back a massive predator, or parent dragon, with nothing but instinct and raw energy. Breathing heavily, Eamon sank to the floor, clutching both hatchlings. Their glow softened, and the hum outside grew distant, though it lingered ominously. He had survived this round, but the symbols, the power of the creatures, and the massive shadow outside all told him one thing. This was just the beginning. Whatever network or force these hatchlings were part of, it was far larger, far more dangerous, and far more mysterious than he could imagine. As he traced another glowing line on the smaller hatchling's wing, he noticed the bigger one watching him intently, eyes sharp, intelligent, and almost expectant. It was as if they knew he was meant to do something next, but what, he had no idea. Lightning split the sky outside, illuminating the treeline. The shadow shifted, larger than before, its glowing eyes fixed on the cabin. The hum had returned, low and deliberate. Eamon realized with a chill that the creature's glow was not just defensive, it was a signal. A warning. And the predator, or parent, was listening. He swallowed hard. Whatever happened next, he couldn't hesitate. He had to understand the symbols, protect the hatchlings, and face whatever was out there. And deep down, a terrifying thought gnawed at him. This storm, these creatures, and the shadow outside weren't random. They were connected. Something was waiting for him to act, and it wouldn't wait forever. The hum rose again, louder this time, as if calling him. The hatchlings flinched, wings quivering, glow flickering like tiny flames. Eamon's heart pounded. One thing was certain. He was no longer just a beekeeper. He had been chosen, for a reason he didn't yet understand, and whatever came next he had to rise to meet it. And then a crack of thunder split the air, louder than any before, shaking the cabin floor. The hatchlings shrieked in unison, wings flaring violently, their glow pulsing like a heartbeat gone wild. Outside, the shadow shifted, closer than ever. Eamon's chest tightened. He knew in that instant, the storm, the creatures, and the glowing network weren't the problem. The real test, the impossible choice, was about to begin. Eamon's breath came in sharp, ragged pulls as he pressed the hatchlings closer, their tiny bodies quivering against his chest. Outside, the storm raged harder than ever. The wind screamed through the trees, bending trunks and shaking the cabin like it wanted to tear it apart. But the real danger was the shadow he had glimpsed before, a massive, predatory shape, moving with terrible purpose through the rain-slicked forest. Lightning lit the treeline and Eamon froze for a heartbeat. The creature was enormous, wings folded tightly against its back, claws long enough to split a tree trunk, eyes glowing amber with intelligence and fury. Its gaze found the cabin, locking onto the hatchlings like they were the only thing in the world that mattered. Every instinct in Eamon screamed danger, but he refused to let fear freeze him. He dropped to his knees and scanned the cabin for anything he could use. The storm had scattered broken hive boxes everywhere, honey dripping in sticky rivers across the mud outside. His mind raced. If he could control the creature's instincts and use the environment, he might have a chance, not to fight this predator outright, but to protect the hatchlings long enough for them to survive. The hatchlings shrieked sharply, wings flaring, light pulsing violently across their tiny bodies. Eamon realized the glow wasn't just random, It was a reaction to danger, a signal. He whispered firmly, "Focus, listen to me. You're safe with me." Somehow, miraculously, they slowed, their pulses syncing with his heartbeat. It was small, but it was enough to give him hope. The predator lunged suddenly, a thunderous roar shaking the cabin and rattling the roof. Rain lashed against the windows, and Eamon felt the ground shiver under its steps. There was no time to think. Acting on instinct, he grabbed a broken hive frame and hurled it toward the creature. Honey and mud splashed across the open ground. The predator skidded slightly, snarling, momentarily distracted by the sticky mess. Eamon grabbed a second frame, this time swinging it like a club, forcing the predator to hesitate as it approached the cabin. He knew this wouldn't stop it for long. The creature was too massive, too strong, but it might give him the seconds he needed to guide the hatchlings. He gestured toward the floor, pressing their tiny bodies against him, and whispered again, "Use it, show me." The smaller hatchling responded instantly. It flared its wings and released a brilliant pulse of violet light, arcing toward the predator. The force struck the creature mid-step and it roared in surprise, staggering back. Eamon's jaw dropped. That fragile, tiny thing, no bigger than a loaf of bread, had just pushed back a monster that could crush him in an instant. He felt awe, fear, and a surge of determination all at once. The bigger hatchling now joined in. Its glow intensified, crackling along its scales like electricity. The predator hesitated, confused by the display. Its roar faltered as if unsure what to do next. Eamon's mind raced. He realized the creatures were not just reacting, they were thinking, choosing when and how to strike, and their power could be guided. He scrambled toward the cabin door, mud sucking at his boots, holding the hatchlings close. "We're going to make it," he muttered, more to himself than them. He set down one of the hives, creating a barrier, and the glowing hatchlings pressed against it, wings flaring, light pulsing. The predator circled, massive wings unfurling, claws scraping mud, and then, something unexpected happened. It paused. Its eyes narrowed, glowing amber in the stormlight, and it tilted its head slightly, observing. Not attacking, not retreating, just watching. The hatchlings chirped softly, wings quivering, light dimming just a fraction. Eamon realized with a jolt, this wasn't a mindless predator. It was their parent. It wasn't here to kill, they were its offspring, but it was testing him, measuring whether he could be trusted. Eamon's heart raced. If he moved too fast, the creature could interpret it as a threat. If he hesitated too long, the storm could collapse the cabin entirely. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his shaking hands. He stepped forward slowly, speaking softly, "I'm not going to hurt them. I'm not your enemy." The hatchlings chirped again, wings flaring slightly, their glow pulsing in response to his tone. The predator blinked, the massive frame shifting slightly as if acknowledging his words. Lightning illuminated the scene, revealing something even more astonishing. The glow from the hatchling scales seemed to extend outward, forming a soft aura that interacted with the storm itself, bending the rain in faint arcs, guiding it around the cabin like a protective shield. Eamon's chest tightened. The creatures were fragile, tiny, yet they carried power he couldn't begin to understand. And somehow, through their instinct and trust, he had become part of it. He knelt, holding the hatchlings close, and whispered again, "You're safe. I won't let anyone hurt you." The predator's gaze lingered, amber eyes intelligent, cautious, and almost respectful. It let out a low, rumbling growl, then spread massive wings and disappeared into the storm, leaving the hatchlings unharmed. Eamon sank to the floor, heart hammering, sweat and rain mixing on his face. Relief washed over him, but only briefly. He glanced at the hatchlings. Their wings quivered, glow dimming to soft pulses. Small chirps of comfort echoed through the cabin. Eamon smiled faintly, exhaustion and awe blending. He had survived against impossible odds, guiding the creatures with courage, intelligence, and determination. They had survived because of him. But the storm wasn't done. Outside, lightning flashed, and through the window he caught sight of something faint, an alien pattern forming in the treeline, glowing briefly before vanishing. Symbols. They were watching, waiting. Whatever network or force these hatchlings belonged to wasn't finished with him yet. Eamon swallowed hard, holding the creatures close. He had won this battle, but the real test, the one that would push him further, demand more courage and intelligence, was coming. A sudden crack of thunder shook the cabin again. The hatchling's glow surged violently, and for a brief moment, the room was bathed in green and violet light. Eamon's eyes widened as he realized the next challenge would arrive faster and closer than he expected. And then, from the forest beyond the cabin, a low, rhythmic hum began again, vibrating through the mud, the trees, the very air. Eamon's chest tightened. The hatchlings stiffened, wings flaring, their glow pulsing wildly. He knew in that instant, the storm, the creatures, and the mysterious network weren't finished. Something far bigger, far more dangerous, and far more incredible was coming. And this time he wouldn't just have to protect the hatchlings, he would have to confront the impossible itself. Eamon held the hatchlings tightly, their small bodies quivering against his chest, wings flicking with nervous energy. The storm had calmed slightly, but the air still thrummed with tension. Outside, the forest was quiet, too quiet, and that made him uneasy. The shadow of the massive creature had disappeared, but he knew better than to think it was gone for good. Whatever force the hatchlings belonged to, it was patient, intelligent, watching. He knelt on the cabin floor, eyes tracing the glowing patterns on the hatchling's scales. The light pulsed faintly, almost like a heartbeat, and he realized it was syncing with the strange symbols on the floor, the ones he had traced from the honeycomb map. The hatchling's wings flared softly as if nudging him to pay attention. He leaned closer, studying the markings. It hit him suddenly. These weren't just patterns, they were coordinates or maybe instructions. A path to something important, hidden beyond the forest, beyond the storm, beyond anything he had ever imagined. And the hatchlings were guiding him. They were showing him where to go. Eamon felt a mix of awe and dread. He had protected these creatures from the immediate danger, but the real challenge was ahead. Whatever awaited at the end of this path, it was larger, stranger, and more powerful than the predator he had just faced. The hatchling's glow pulsed stronger, vibrating through his hands, almost as if they were urging him forward. He rose slowly, glancing at the creatures. "All right," he whispered. "Let's see this through. I don't know what's waiting for us, but we'll face it together." The hatchlings chirped softly, pressing against him as if confirming their trust. Small payoff but meaningful. He wasn't alone. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the mud slick and the air heavy with the smell of wet earth. Eamon stepped cautiously, keeping the hatchlings close. The forest was dark, shadows stretching long under the moonlight, but the faint glow from their scales lit a path forward. Every step was deliberate, careful, but he couldn't ignore the growing sense that the forest itself was alive, responding to the hatchling's presence. A sudden rustle in the underbrush made him freeze. His pulse quickened. A small creature darted across the path. A rabbit? No, too large, too strange. Its eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the hatchling's light. It paused, observing him, then disappeared into the trees. Eamon swallowed. The path was filled with unknowns, creatures and forces he couldn't yet understand. But hesitation would cost him nothing. Forward was the only option. He pressed deeper into the forest, the hatchling's glow pulsing stronger with each step. Patterns on the forest floor seemed to echo the symbols he had traced earlier, almost like a breadcrumb trail. The smaller hatchling chirped suddenly, wings flaring in a sharp pulse. Eamon's head snapped up. Ahead, a faint structure emerged from the darkness. A stone circle, etched with glowing alien runes that mirrored the hatchling's scales. His stomach tightened. This was it. Whatever network or force they belonged to, it was here. He knelt carefully, placing the hatchlings on the ground in the center of the circle. Their glow brightened, responding to the runes, and the air hummed with energy. Eamon's eyes widened as the runes shifted, forming shapes, symbols, and patterns that made no sense to him but clearly communicated with the hatchlings. The bigger hatchling flapped its wings violently, and a pulse of light shot into the circle, activating the runes. A sudden tremor shook the ground. Eamon grabbed the hatchlings instinctively, holding them close. From the trees, shadows moved, smaller than the predator but dozens of them, emerging silently, almost like guardians. He tensed, ready for another battle, but the creatures didn't attack. Instead, they formed a circle around him, watching, observing, judging. The hatchlings chirped again, and Eamon realized something extraordinary. The pulse of their glow had not only activated the runes, it had communicated with the guardians. Whatever force this was, it recognized him now, acknowledged him as a protector, a guide, someone worthy. A small payoff of understanding and trust filled him, but the weight of responsibility pressed heavier than ever. Suddenly, the smaller hatchling leapt from his hands, wings flaring like blades of light. It hovered above the circle, emitting a high-pitched pulse. The runes flared, a radiant surge of energy that lifted into the night sky. Eamon shielded his eyes as a column of light shot upward, illuminating the forest like a second sun. The guardians bowed slightly, and the energy spread outward, touching the treetops, the mud, the horizon beyond. He gasped. The hatchlings weren't just creatures, they were conduits. And through them he had activated something enormous, something ancient. A force that could shape the world, protect the innocent, or destroy the careless. Eamon's heart hammered, awe and fear battling for dominance. A soft chirp from the bigger hatchling brought him back to the present. He knelt again, pressing his forehead to its glowing wing. "We did it," he whispered. "For now at least." But even as he said it, he felt the pull of a greater mystery. This circle, the guardians, the glowing hatchlings, it was a gateway, a beginning, not an end. Lightning flashed across the horizon, though the storm had passed, and Eamon caught a glimpse of movement beyond the trees. Another shadow, larger and more purposeful than the first, traced the far edge of the forest. His pulse quickened. The hatchlings' glow brightened in response. Whatever this force was, whatever network they were part of, it had noticed him. And it was coming. Eamon swallowed hard, holding the hatchlings close. He had survived storms, predators, and impossible odds. He had protected fragile lives against forces far greater than himself. And now he understood a truth deeper than fear. He was part of something far bigger, something that demanded courage, intelligence, and heart beyond measure. The glowing hatchlings chirped, wings flaring, pulsing like a heartbeat in the night. Eamon's chest tightened with both dread and determination. He had survived this far, but the real adventure, the impossible journey, was just beginning. And somewhere beyond the trees, the next mystery waited.